Hi, my name is Darren Meyer, and I am the lead solution architect for Endor Labs. I'm going to talk to you today about planning as a phase of the SDLC and where to put dependency management activities in there. Now, historically, planning was a big kind of forward-looking activity that took up a lot of time. In a waterfall world, it was let's make sure that we understand every cost and every activity and hire a bunch of product managers and project managers that decide exactly what we're going to build, how we're going to build it, and all of these things, and get down our costs and contracts and all of these things. And for all of the problems that caused and all the reasons that's been modernized, it did have one advantage in which it was very easy to make sure that all stakeholders had a voice in the planning. So when you're looking at security controls or dependency choices or dependency management, you had a big lever to pull where you could say people who are experts in this field, who are experts in this topic, can be an equal participant and plan along with people. But modern planning doesn't typically look like that. Especially if you're not starting a greenfield kind of application project, your planning more looks like a sprint plan where you're sitting down before a 2 to 4 week sprint and you're saying, what tasks are we as a team going to take on? The plan is redone every day in a stand-up meeting in many organizations where you're altering based on what you've learned yesterday. What is the plan for today? How are we going to do this? What does the next release look like? And especially so in a continuous delivery environment where you might be making plans that constantly change. So how do you do something as complex as consider dependency management and other security controls when you're in an environment where you don't have a big lever to pull, right? Uh, it's complicated, and it's often the solution to this is a security champions program where you have a developer on each team, or sometimes more than one, who is a developer first and foremost, but also has responsibility and scope to consider things like dependency management, security controls, security testing practice, things like that. From a dependency management standpoint, what that looks like in a planning context is really strong identification of dependencies, really strong research capabilities, and really strong licensing and compliance analysis. So when I'm choosing an open source package to use, I need to understand what risk I might be bringing into the environment. And that could be license risk, it could be compliance risk, it could be operational risk, right? And that is part of planning, although it dips into requirements a little bit too. But more importantly are things of kind of strategy and planning. How are we going to manage dependencies? What are my rules going to be around dependency management? Do I accept critical vulnerabilities? Do I accept things that pose real risk? Do I what counts as real risk, right? Those are the kind of planning activities in a dependency management environment that you really need to get out ahead of. So what I generally recommend as part of the planning phase of the SDLC is to create a set of standards as an organization. These don't have to be highly detailed, documented, written down to every line in legalese policies or things like that. A standard can be simply an agreement on how something is going to be conducted, right? And you write it down so that everybody can reference it. So it can be something like, hey, when we are doing software, when we have dependencies that meet these criteria, perhaps they have a vulnerability that is patchable, we are not going to proceed and release that with a patchable vulnerability in it, right? Or at least not without an exception. Or it could be something like, hey, when it meets this complex set of criteria, which we are going to put into a technical control, right? Then we're going to block a build. And in this case, we're going to issue a warning. And in this case, we're going to issue a Slack message. And in this case, we're going to make a PR comment, right? So it's more about program planning than it is about planning the specific software, right? But it's also, there's a planning piece of licensing compliance requirements as well. It's not just about vulnerabilities and specific articulable risks. It can be things like, are we comfortable with how active this project is? Are we comfortable with what licenses are being applied to our open source environment? So building out those kinds of policies and standards up front in a easy to understand, referenceable way so that as the detailed planning is occurring, they can be referenced and they can be enforced is an important part of making sure the SDLC operates smoothly with open source dependency controls in place.